Hello, and welcome everyone to our monthly digital wellness video series. We're very excited to welcome and have you here with us today. We are going to be talking about deleting yourself from Finder sites. My name is Amira, and I work at Consumer Reports, and I am based in sunny New York, wintry and snowy New York today. Although I like the combo of sunny and snowy. I'd love to introduce our other co-hosts who are with us today. Yael, can you give yourself a quick intro and where are you calling in from?
Hey everybody, I'm Yael and I am in Phoenix.
Great. And helping us out on production is Kimberly. Kimberly, you want to say hello?
Hi everyone, I'm in Atlanta today where it's sunny.
And helping in the Q&A is Chet. Chet, you want to say a quick hi?
Yeah, hello folks. I'm Chet and I'm from Austin, Texas. 74 degrees here today.
All right, everyone is in way sunnier and warmer places than I am today, but I am embracing the snow and winter. Okay, well, that's it. You have us there. We're going to be hosting you throughout the next hour and taking you through Finder sites, which I know has been a very popular topic for all of us. Before we jump into everything, I do want to give a quick shout out to the agenda. So we will be talking about what are Finder sites. I know this is an introduction to many people and just getting to know what they do and how they work. I know many of you are also very excited to hear about how do you opt out of them, take your information out, as well as some services you might use. And then we will also leave time for question and answer and a brief wrap up. But before we start, I do want to give a quick focus on the housekeeping as well. Just to acknowledge that this is an introduction. I know some of you are coming in at many different levels. Some of you know Finder sites, have experiences with them, and some of you do not. So that is why we're going to take some time in the beginning to actually identify how these sites work and what they are and how do you find them. And then we'll get into the second half, which is actually taking your data off of them and how do you do that. And while we do that, some acronyms are going to come up. And so I'd love for you to just call out when you don't understand things or things are a little bit funny and you're unclear, because this is the land of unusual words and things that are said that are not always clear, and we do want to make sure that you are following with us. I also do want to call out that we are recording so that people who aren't able to join us are able to watch in the future. So as a pro tip, make sure you do not share any private and personal details about yourself. But we do want to hear from you. So if you want to chat with us, do engage in the chat box where Kimberly is hanging out. So many of you are already doing so, and it's great to see you there. When you're there, be sure to select panelists and attendees so that everyone is able to see what you are saying, because they might have the same questions and they might have comments and information for you as well. And then in the Q&A, Chet is hanging out to help answer your questions. He will also be flagging questions that we might want to bring up that are very popular, that we will talk about as a group in the latter half of the call. And then just also to call out, there is closed captioning available. So if you select at the bottom of your screen, there is a section for you to select viewing details, and you are able to turn those on and off. If they are helpful to you, please do use them. We do want to make sure that this is accessible and audio enabled for those that need it. And then the last thing, we do realize we are using Zoom, which has been in the news the last year as it has become used more often. And we do want to make sure that this is a safe, respectful space for everyone. So please do your part in maintaining respect for us, for those that are participating, and in the chat and Q&A. If we see inappropriate behavior, we will be blocking and taking necessary steps for people. Okay, the necessaries are out of the way. So talk a little bit about Finder sites and why we're here. Well, we at CR are always thinking about our privacy and the information that is shared online, and Finder sites is just one piece of that that we really want to elevate. We were thinking new year, new you, time to take back some of that info. We know that these are things that people really want to be able to be in control, and we're here today to kind of share how you can be in control of your information. Finder sites are those kind of pesky things that live online that share your personal information. So what they do is they take information off public sites and then they publish it for anyone to pretty much find and see. There are sites like My Life, Spokeo, People Finder. Some of them you know, some of them you don't. But what we do know for certain is that these sites are rampantly gaining in popularity and they are growing ever more as we continue to share our data and find this information on people valuable. I want to note two specific things. One, this really feeds into individuals being concerned and paying money to see what is listed and remove that content. So they're adhering to your desire to take that content off. And then the other facet of this is they are perpetuating these privacy concerns of anyone being able to find personal details of another individual and can lead to really serious things like identity theft, harm, harassment, both online and offline, and malicious uses of your data that we don't like. So they're both targeting you as an individual to want to control your information, but also then targeting others who want access to your information. So as we think more about that, Yael is going to go into more details about how they work and what we should know as it relates to our data. So Yael, feel free to dig in.
Okay, so some of the information collected on people's sites, your personal information like your address, your email address, your phone number. And some of the sites also collect information on any lawsuits or bankruptcies. If you've been to court, they have copies of court records or criminal records. They might have information on where you went to school, your employment. Some of them have details about relatives, like they'll say these people live in a household with these people or are related to other people. And pretty much anything that is available in public records can proliferate in these sites. And the way that they find, because consent to it, because they're going through public records, they're going through social media, they go through like commercial sources, even newspaper clippings sometimes, and they'll post it on a site for people to access. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. And then they're really good at kind of using search engine optimization to kind of get that on the top when they link to you. And there's not a lot of laws to protect our data from these sites. In some states, like in California, you can there's ways that you can kind of try to get the information out, but a lot of it'll reproliferate if it's public record. There's actually some sites, like some of them can connect you, like if you're trying to find somebody that you want to get a hold of, either as a journalist or as an individual. Sometimes that there's like ways that it can be used that's helpful, but obviously it can be malicious too. So there's just a tension between how the data is used. When it's used well, it's good, and when it's bad, it's really bad. And so there's kind of a gray area, and there's not a lot of regulation on that.
Okay, we're going to jump into our polls. These are sort of more icebreaker polls just to get you all energized and thinking more about what do we need to think about when it relates to Finder sites. So we've got the first poll up there, and it's just how often do you search your name online? I'm just curious. I want to know who's out there doing some of this digging. What are your practices as it comes to digital privacy? How are you engaging with it? How are you checking yourself? As a general rule, this can be deemed really important to some people. Some people are just like, oh, I've never done this thing. And so let's see what you got. We've got about 10 more seconds. A bunch of you have already filled it in, so thank you so much. If you don't see the poll, we will be sharing it, sharing the answers out loud, so don't worry and no fret. Okay, it does look like we have the poll results. So about 34% of you say that you're viewing it every few years. About 23% of you have said never viewed your name online, never done a search of it. 26% are doing it yearly. 16% are doing it more than once a year. Yael, how often do you search your name online?
I look for mine every 3 months or so.
Okay, that's actually the same with me. I do it about every 3 months. I feel like it's a really good practice to get into the act of seeing what information about you exists, how it's being shared, and which ones are sort of at the top of your search versus others. So there is no perfect answer to this, but with Yal and I, who are generally more privacy conscious, we do search it 3 months. I would recommend doing it at least on an annual basis, just so you can find out what information is about you online, and you can learn and take the steps on how to protect yourself. Okay, so the next follow up question is mainly for those who have searched themselves at some point, whether it's every few years or in the past year. We really do want to ask you, let me just make sure we can get to the right slide. Okay, perfect. There we go. You'll see the poll come up right now. Have you found yourself in a search site? So this is something that we'll talk a little bit more about what it looks like in the next slide, but you will probably know if you found yourself, because it is scary and frightening and also daunting to be like, what is this thing that appeared about me that I have no idea? There's an over resounding number of yeses coming through, and I just want to say that I feel you. I feel you for sure. Okay, thank you so much for doing that second poll. If you want to share your experiences, feel free to do in the chat. I will also be sharing some of mine with you all today. So 72% of you said you have found yourself in a search site. And I'm guessing that that's the large reason why you showed up today, to be like, what do I do about this? A blessed 8% of you said you have not found yourself in a search site, but that doesn't mean that it won't happen to you. And about 20% of you are not sure. So maybe you just haven't seen it, or you haven't searched yourself in a while, which is totally okay. So I did say I want to talk you through a little bit about what happened to me. So if you're looking at these slides right now, I search myself every 3 months. And in my last search of myself, I came up in a Finder search site. It is not often that this happens to me, but it is something that I do not take lightly. So as you can see at the top there, the Finder search is my life, which is a very popular dominant organization. And what it was, it showed up actually on the front page of my search. Finder sites are magnificent at SEO, which is search engine optimization, which means they really use their tagging and their search credentials very well to make sure that once your name is on there, it's pushed to the top or the first part of your page. And then when it does that, it has this like super catchy tagline where it says, New York has court arrest records at ... Obviously, something like that is going to be very catchy for someone like myself to be like, I don't have court arrest records. Why is it saying I do? I don't want anyone to think I do. And I'm going to immediately click on it. And when I do, I kind of get taken to this reputation profile, which, to be fair, is not a great reputation profile, and also makes me want to just click more and be like, why is this my reputation? It's saying I'm associated to people who I have no idea who they are. And it's giving all this information that is both inaccurate and kind of frightening. I love the people that are giving shout outs to my DuckDuckGo searching. As you notice, I don't say which search engine you should use. I know everyone's using different ones. I do use DuckDuckGo, and I do appreciate the shout outs there for people who are using different forms of search engines and tools and browsers that are putting privacy first. So this is just an example. I'm going to come back to this later, but I want you to know that this happens to everyone. It shows up like this. It catches you off guard, and it sometimes makes you pretty scared as to what is this information that is out there about me and what do I do about it? So we'll come back to that in a little bit, but we're going to talk first about why you would want to delete this data and the information behind it. So Yael is going to dig in there.
Okay, hopefully my audio is working. So yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to delete your data. One of them is maybe you just don't want everybody to know, to look up and know like where you live and your age and who you're, related to or associated with. But there's also like, like to prevent harassment. Like maybe you don't want people to know your home address or your email address or your phone number, because they can use that to harass you. It also puts you at risk of identity theft, a little bit increased risk of identity theft and credit card fraud. And then sometimes the information is just inaccurate or misleading. So I guess, like Amir mentioned, like sometimes you're like, I don't want people to think I'm associated with people I haven't heard of. But it can also be kind of invasive when it's accurate. So both those things are bad. So there's a lot of reasons why people just don't want information out there in the first place, and they're all, I think, totally valid. So I started putting together a guide that I called the Big Ass Data Broker Opt Out List, to help people kind of opt out of these sites on their own. It's kind of there's a lot of people that help me on it. Like people will tell me when things have changed, but it basically gives a list of different search sites and where you can opt out. And then I try to organize it by high priority and what information they'll ask. So like if somebody wants, like if you have to make a bunch of phone calls, you can do those all at once. And it'll tell you like do they want you to mail something in or send a fax machine? Does it cost money? Which I think is crazy. What information will they ask you? And it's kind of a starting point. There's some sites that still don't allow opt-outs, and I didn't include those. But yeah, I'm constantly updating this based on information from other people. Um, and then I go through it. I do like one big update twice a year, and then like people send me different kind of pull requests on GitHub or just email me, and I make changes to it to keep it up to date because these organizations are constantly like changing how to opt out or like being sold and bought. So it gets a little bit confusing.
So I stopped sharing my screen because I thought it'd be really helpful for us to actually view the document that Yael is talking about and has created, which I will say is a masterpiece for someone who is looking to get information and step-by-step guides and just kind of understanding what Finder sites are out there. So as you can see on my screen right now, I've pulled it up. It's a handy Google Doc, so hopefully that feels familiar to so many of you. And you can scroll through it, and as Yael pointed out, it gives a lot of different options for sorting, which are right here at the top. And then as you scroll down, you can get support for each different one. Yeah, is there anything else we want to call out on this one?
Um, I guess there's some that are like high priority. I think you mentioned I put the little skull and crossbones next to it. So if you only have so much time, you should start with those because this is like a really, really annoying and time consuming process.
It is. And it's something that you really need to sit and go through just when you have time. So I do recommend, this is like the big resource of this call. Kimberly shared it in the chat already. I see 100 of you in the document almost. So I know you're in there with us. And I'd recommend just using this as like this holy grail of this conversation around Finder sites. And we're going to talk a little bit more on the application of this, but I kudos to Yael for creating this, who's the true expert on digging into this, because these sort of resources actually don't usually exist online for a step-by-step guide throughout all of them. Okay, that's great. And I'm gonna actually go back to our screen share, which I believe we are now in. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, tell us some of the challenges we're gonna face around here.
Okay, so there's a lot of challenges. There's not one way to opt out. Every site has a different process, and some of them are kind of ridiculous. Like you have to opt out of 2 places, or some of them make you create an account before you opt out, and it's annoying. Some of them will ask you for personal information, and I always say don't send them information they don't already have. So if you're not listed, make sure you know you're listed on there before you send them information to take out. And that's kind of included in the doc, how to do that. Some of them will ask for a driver's license, and I think it's kind of a personal decision, like how badly you want it taken down. But you can always black out any information that they don't need, so you're not creating like more of a paper trail on them. And I guess like the thing to know is that this isn't like a one-time thing. It's annoying. Um, and it can take a long time to do and a lot of work. And sometimes these sites like reproliferate. They'll be like, oh, we just pulled it again. And so you have to like keep doing it, which is why you can't just do it once. You have to do it depending on how badly you need the information taken down and how high of a risk you are. You might need to do it every 3 months, every 6 months.
And I will say that we will also send this out in our resource after the call. And so people have asked to download it, and we'll send out a document. The reason I would recommend continuously going back to the Google Doc that Yael had pointed out is because it will be constantly updated based on these challenges that she's mentioned, like things change all the time. And so that is just like one reason I do the Google Doc, but I know for accessibility, it's sometimes easier to have like a PDF version of this you can easily use. But do know that these things are changing and the challenges are going to continue existing. Okay, I promise we're going to come back to this because I want to take you through my process on Finder sites and what I learned and part of what happened when I saw this. So I did go to the big ass data broker opt-out list and I did say, my life, what are you doing? And sure enough, it's high priority because it is really popular. And I know that so many of you in the chat have also mentioned that you had similar instances with my life as well. So that does not despise me, but makes me sad and infuriated that we need more regulation on these things. We need to control these type of sites. So when I went to my life, I was like, I need to opt out. And there's these instructions that are in the data broker opt-out list. So the instructions for something like my life say, I need to select that profile page. So I'm going to go back just one slide quickly. That reputation page that I've screenshotted, I would copy and paste the URL from there, which is a copy of my account on their profile. So I would take that and I would email my life and say, I want to remove this. When doing so, they might require me to submit certain information like my driver's license, like other pieces of documentation. I personally don't love that sort of requirement. So I might have to weigh in my head, would I rather remove it or would I rather send in my information to remove it? There are risks and benefits to both of those. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, I'm like, I absolutely want to remove this piece of information from the site. So I would email them my driver's license, but what I would do is I'd actually black out a bunch of the info they do not need. They need it for verification only. They don't need my driver's license info, my number, all that sort of details. And then I would have to do this very tedious, annoying thing where I'd have to actually call them to do so. So there's some information on how previously you were allowed to call and give them the information on the phone, but it might not be the case anymore. And so sometimes they might do these pesky things where they change up their rules midway through. So in this case, you'd probably have to deal one-on-one with them and go through that sort of long-winded process. So my life is not easy to unregister and opt out from. But this is one example, and there are other ones that are way easier. So there are options to center your time around the ones that are easier, and sometimes just work through the ones that are harder in a more tedious process when you have more time. Okay, so this is not a great example because I can't do this with you all on the phone here. It's a little bit harder to pick up my phone and say, hey, my life, can you get this out of the way? But I did want to show you a step-by-step guide as to one that I did opt out on recently, which is very popular as well. And that is the site People Finders. People Finders pops up for a lot of people, and it shows a lot of your information online. And it has a pretty easy opt-out process that shows you the gist of how to do this that we're going to go through today. So this is the site. It's called peoplefinders.com. You can go through. In doing this, I have added my information to the slides. I have blocked out any sensitive information, but this actually just shows how easy it is to use it and find information on anyone. So here I put my name and I put the city and state that I live in, which, as you all know, is information I shared in the beginning and is that easy to find on anyone. So I went to the site and I added in this information and I got this profile on myself. It gave my age, it allowed me to view details, sensitive information that I was like, please do not share this. I don't want this online. This is all part of the opt-out process, so bear with me because you do need this page when you get to it. And so then the next thing is capturing that URL from this page. So I've said I wanted to view my details, and then it gave me a URL for my profile page. Obviously, it is one of those sites where it's going to say, do a 3-day trial or sign up or pay money to actually be able to opt out of these sort of sites. I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to see what they have on me. I just want to take my info off. So I'm not going to pay. I'm not going to do a trial. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to go to that top bar where the red arrow is pointing. And I want to capture that URL because I'm going to take it to the opt-out page. So if you go to peoplefinders.com/opt-out, and I know we're going quick here, so you'll get the slides and all the information is in the handy opt-out, the opt-out document. But if you go to the opt-out slide or the opt-out page, you'll be asked to enter the URL for your profile online. This is the URL I just showed you how I got to it. And so I'm going to copy and paste that. I'm going to put it in there. I enter my personal email address. I verify that I'm not a robot, and I select send request. Seems pretty easy, right? I got a notification saying they've sent a verification to my email, to which I shifted over to my email and I selected the email they sent me and I clicked verify that this is me and I want to remove. Then I'm redirected back to the site and I've got a request confirmation that they've taken it down or they will in the next 48 hours. Sometimes you might want to check in on these things after 48 hours just to make sure it is actually done. And that is something I would recommend. And I'd recommend doing this every so often because they will continue to pop up. So People Finder is a great example of how, that took me 5 minutes. My life might take me hours. And so you're going to get a gist of both of them. And some are going to be easy and hard, but it's a matter of just sticking through and creating a regiment around this. But it is a process and it is something you're going to need to stick with. But as we can see, some were easier for me to do on my own, some were not. And in some cases, you're like, this is like a game of whack-a-mole, and you're just not going to want to do it, which I totally get because a lot of people do not want to do this constantly and kind of want to get it out of their system. So there are a lot of services that have popped up as a result that make this easier. And Yael's going to just talk us through some of the ones that she's been finding are helpful and some of the ones that are challenging to use.
Okay, so like Amir said, sometimes you just want to pay somebody to do this for you if you can afford it and you have the money. Unfortunately, like not everybody does, and so that's kind of depressing because not everybody has the privilege to control what information is shared about them online. But if you do have the money, there are sites that you can use to pay to do this for you. Delete Me is one of them. There's reputation.com, Privacy Duck, Reputation Defender, and Canary with a K. They don't all remove all of your data, unfortunately, because some places won't allow third parties to remove it, and they might only erase your content from certain sites. So if you're depending on like how concerned you are about it, you might need to do additional information beyond paying somebody. But Delete Me is one of the sites. They remove information from 41 sites every 3 months, and it's $129 a year for one person or $229 for 2 people. The cost, yeah, and I don't know, it's you kind of have to decide like, is this worth it, the time that I'm saving, depending on your circumstances. But Canary is the one that I just started using. And it's pretty cool because there's different options. It's like a monthly fee. I think it ranges from like $4 a month to $10 a month or something. But it'll give you more information on what is available and do you want to opt out. And for the lower paying version, you can do it yourself. For the higher paying one, you just say like, do this for me, and they'll opt you out. And it's pretty easy to use. So there are options if you just don't have, because it can be really, really time consuming to do all this yourself. So just know that there are paid options out there.
And yeah, like what you use Canary, is there a reason why you've liked using Canary over other ones in the past?
Yeah, well, I had a bad experience with Delete Me at one point where I had a bunch of stuff that they said was removed, but when I went to the sites, it wasn't actually gone, and they kind of had to redo it. And then I've used Privacy Duck, but I haven't been getting updates. And one of these other sites was claiming affiliation that it didn't have, and they just seemed a little sketchy. So, but Canary, I don't know. I just I feel like it's really easy to use and gives you a lot of information, and they'll tell you like they'll let you decide like, no, you don't have to opt out my email address from this site. This is actually my website or whatever. And so there's more information available, which I think is really cool. And I think like for people who can't, maybe you can't pay $129 all at once, like you can just sign up for Canary for a month or two and then unsubscribe, just to kind of see what's out there. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I've definitely done the whack-a-mole approach where I do it on my own in the past. Although I think we sometimes need to consider, paid options versus others that can be totally time saving and what that means for you. I generally do feel that the paid options are great that they've come as a result of an issue, but that the inaccessibility to the average person who is already paying for so many things to keep them safe online, like a password manager, a VPN, all these sort of things that cost money, it just makes something like this unobtainable and an extra barrier for them. And so I resisted it because of that, but I think that it depends on how much you want to protect yourself and your information. And so just by doing general searches of myself and going through some of the Finder sites, I realized how much more data has come up about me in the last year, even. And I see myself moving more towards a desire to have something like Canary in my life, just to be an assist to the work I'm already doing. Okay, we have tons of questions, which makes me so happy because that means you're all thinking about this in so many ways. And so I do want to jump into the questions that Chet has been moderating so far, and we've been trying to address throughout some of this. I do see a lot of questions, though, just to start off on, can we get these resources? How do we get access to the doc? And I know that that is something that's really exciting for all of you. So I want to call out again that we will be sharing all of this in our wrap up that'll come within 24 hours after this call. So be on the lookout for that. In it, we will include an access to the Big Ass Data Broker opt-out list. We will be including slides on their own in a PDF format so you can navigate all the links, URL, and information that we've shared. And we will be doing a recording. We will be sending a link to the recording of this video if you want to watch this all together again, and share it with others, of course. And we will be sharing some resources that are really, really helpful when understanding some of these things and more information that CR has put out there. I do want to also point you to this great article I've just posted in the chat that Yael has created a little bit ago that talks more about the details of this and really encompasses a lot of the conversation today. So if that is helpful, do please look at that. But that takes out like 15 questions right there. So I'm going to jump into the other ones that people have asked. I'm going to start, Yael, Chet, if there's other ones that are coming up that you want to elevate for everyone to hear, please do jump in. I'm going to start with the first one that someone has mentioned. Is it helpful for me to create a separate email address for these type of accounts? Because you're noting, as you should, that when I email My Life or I email People Finder, I'm using my personal email address. Not that I disclosed what email address I was using, but in many instances, what are the risks with sending your real email address? So yeah, I've mentioned before that there's toss-ups and decisions you have to make with which data you give people. And so if you're giving your email address to get your information taken off publicly, I think that can outweigh it. Although for more security, it is always helpful to have what some people call like a spam email address. So the email address you use when you want to sign up for things or you want to get access, but doesn't give away your personal details or information. And so if you have one of those, or if you've considered creating one of those, you can most definitely use it in this instance to opt out without giving more access and info to information you do not want online. So I'd recommend it as a general practice, but you don't have to do it. And it's totally up to you whether you decide on doing that, because I know it takes time to manage then a second account. Okay, that one came up to me, but is there any ones, Chet and Yao, that are coming up for you right now?
There was one.
Oh.
Go ahead, Yao.
Oh, sorry. There was a question that somebody asked about what the FTC was doing, and it's actually kind of funny because the FTC released a report on data brokers in 2014, and it had all these really great recommendations, but Congress just hasn't passed data broker legislation since then. So like I don't know if that really answers it. There are some things that states are doing to help people opt out, especially like California and I think Vermont. But yeah, they had all these recommendations and they just haven't happened yet. And even in the states that do have legislation, there's a lot of kind of workarounds where they're like, oh, but it's still okay to share public records information and stuff like that. So that's kind of where we're at on that end.
Yeah, the other question that I see is related to what Consumer Reports is doing, or if there's a way to start a petition to ask lawmakers to require an easy or straightforward way to opt out for people, right? I don't know if one of you want to answer that.
Well, I really appreciate people asking that, because you're at the point where you should be, and where I think is best for us to know. Like, we now know about finder sites and they make us angry. They're taking our personal information. They're not regulated. There's no ways to get off of them in secure ways. And even with states like California or Vermont that have some sort of rules, they're not doing full protection of this. So we're angry. We want change on these things. And I think what we have to do is talk about, as a community, how do we get there? Whether we can do further lobbying for protection of our privacy, for regulation. Truthfully, just without regulation of these sites, they've been able to live in a gray zone. And they're doing so because not everyone is familiar with finder sites. They are pesky and they're often unheard of and not known very well. And so we're not having more conversations around them. So the first step is awareness, is really sharing this information with you all, and you being able to talk to others about finder sites and being equipped with resources and information to start taking your data off of them. And then the second is definitely that lobbying of legislation around finder sites to control it. So as we think towards policy and work that Consumer Reports and others can do, this is an area we feel very strongly about, and we want to work with community to have more of an impact there, to talk more about how do we control and regulate these sort of organizations.
There is also some work that Consumer Reports has done around CCPA, like they piloted an authorized agent to help people kind of exercise those data rights. And then they've also, Maureen Mahoney and Justin Brookman have also done some work on just looking at like, what are the obstacles to exercising privacy rights in California? And there's some blog posts on that I can link to in the chat. Just some of the advocacy work and research into that. So it is kind of an ongoing area of concern.
The other question, Yale, that came up is, if you do ask to get removed from these sites, how do you know that for how long is it removed, and what stops them from repopulating information?
Yeah, so like I think there's like two questions. One of them is, if you give a site information, then are they going to use that? Are they going to add that to it? And I definitely don't recommend giving information they don't already have. Like, you can give them information to verify that you are who you say you are, so they can remove it. And then the other question is like, will they keep pulling it and reproliferating that information? And the answer is kind of yes and no. It depends on the data broker. I found that some of them have been pretty good about, when I've opted out, my stuff is still opted out, but some of them continue to pull the data and you have to keep opting out over and over again. I do think it gets better over time, but and probably the goal is not to be completely anonymous to everybody forever, because there's real estate records are public if you know where to look for them. In many states, voter records are public. So it's just kind of about lowering your digital footprint and making it harder to find that information. Yeah, it is kind of an ongoing and annoying process.
There's so many questions here. I'm just digging through them. Thank you all for asking these questions. All right. Does it matter what search engine you use? I will say all search engines operate differently as it relates to their own practices and algorithms and general marketing and advertising. And so while I was able to find the My Life listing on DuckDuckGo, when I searched another search engine, I was unable to find it. And so it can pop up and down. So I will say generally it changes, and there are ones you can use that provide you more security, and I would do the ones you feel most comfortable with, but also that are necessary for your privacy and security online. But many people are very used to the phrase and the verb, Google yourself or Google it. So I do know that that is the default for many people. And so if you search there, I think you're getting a large portion of people who what they're seeing. And then if you search other places, you'll get different versions of that. All right. Anything else, Yao and Chet, that are coming up?
One question was, what do you do about sites that don't seem to have an opt-out option?
I mean, I don't know that you can't. Like, I didn't even include those in the opt-out guide because I didn't feel like it was useful information for people to know. Like, your information is available on these sites and you can't opt out. There are some places that, like, if you are a victim of domestic violence or some other circumstances, then like more sites will remove you. Like if you have a search warrant, and so that's kind of an option to look at if you're in that situation. But yeah, there's just really not a lot. One thing you can do though is you can like if you are doxxed, like if somebody shares your personal information, you can try to get that removed from the search engines. And I have a couple of links to that for Bing and for Google that you can like at least like maybe it won't be indexed or it'll be more difficult to find. And then if somebody posts something on social media to try to get it removed that way.
Okay, I'm still going through some of these. We did bring up CCPA, so the California Consumer Protection Act, a few times, and there are individuals in here that are asking whether that simplifies the process or makes it different for individuals. As Yao mentioned, we are working on greater pushes towards better privacy updates in CCPA, which is one of the earlier privacy protection acts in the country. And so while it is the first, there's a lot more work to do while we scope that out. And I think these are the sort of things Consumer Reports cares about including in there. And we can do a lot more work on it. So as you go to sites, there is often, if you scroll down and they're adhering to CCPA, there are options for you if you're in California to say, I'm in California and I'm doing this under CCPA. And then you might, or you should get easier access to opt out. Although we have done our own CCPA studies at Consumer Reports, and we have found that sometimes it is still not as easy to opt out, which means we actually need more pushes on privacy and legislation around that, and people to adhere and be accountable for being able to opt out pretty easily. So in reality, it should be easier for you, but it isn't always the case. But it also points to the fact that we just need greater privacy legislation across the nation. Just because you live in California does not mean that you should be the only one who has access to these sort of resources to opt out easier. It is definitely something that we strongly advocate for, and we at CR are working harder and harder on trying to push for federal legislation.
Oh, I see a question about will deleting data hinder a background check process when applying for a job? And I would not worry about that because technically you're not supposed to use these people's search sites for background checks. There's like a series of regulations you're supposed to follow if you're doing something that could affect employment or housing. And that's that you should be allowed to correct misinformation and be aware of how those decisions were made. And so I'm guessing like I've had background checks and I've never had a problem with those, even though I have opted out. Like, I don't think that you need your information on all of these public sites to be able to pass a background check.
All right, I'm still going through. We've got tons of questions. Trying to answer the ones that are most popular and people are asking the same thing so that we can really focus on as many of the issues that you have as possible. Some have asked like, why do certain sites select certain people to include in there? And I will say there is, as far as I know, no algorithm that picks certain people or when they opt out deems them as more important or that they have things to hide. I think these services are generally just scraping whatever they can from public files to get as many people as they can so that they can try to hit as many people who would care about doing this as possible. And so I do generally think that we don't need to be worried about whether you're picked or whether you're not picked, whether when you remove it, is it identifying something? I think the point is that they're literally just trying to hit the most amount of people as they can. So I wouldn't worry about that, but do be aware that it will probably happen to everyone at some point if it hasn't happened to you already. And for some places like Spokeo, I know that some people have asked if you pay for a membership, does it remove your info? Many of the sites, unfortunately, do have this rule where you have to become a member or you pay to be a member. And those are the sort of sneaky tricks that we do not like. Those are the sort of things that con you into being a member to remove that data or paying money. And that feels totally backwards to consumer protections and your ability to own where you sign up and where you have your name placed. And so some do require you to sign up. I think very few require you to pay before you do it, but in some cases you might be hit with that. And I would check the opt-out list just to make sure that there's no other processes for that. In some cases you might just have to call and speak to them to say, hey, I don't want to sign up. What else can I do to get my name off these lists? Again, timely and tedious. Okay, so do we have a couple more questions coming in? Chat, Yael, anything else coming up?
The one other one, which I think you touched on a little bit, was is it worth paying somebody to go through the process of removing information, and what would you recommend, kind of thing?
I mean, I think it's a personal decision. It depends on like how much time do you have, like what is your tolerance for the kind of tedious, annoying part of removal, and like how much like do you have the money for it? Like I think it's a personal decision. Like I've done both. Like I've paid for it and I've also opted out on my own. So, but just be aware that like it's not like not all these sites that opt out for you are comprehensive.
Right. And then there was a question about adding disinformation to confuse these people finder sites. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I haven't ever thought about that. So I had to think about that, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's an interesting question because I know like when they ask you for security questions related to if you forget your password or whatever, one of the suggestions that we have given people is don't, make up something that you only know, and as a way to protect yourself, right? So there you're really giving putting information that is not accurate, but it's not something that they would find easily, right? This is kind of a little bit different take on that.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
Right.
So if you do it once and you continue doing it, and information can get pretty out of hand pretty quickly. And generally, I think we're doing a lot to fight misinformation and bad info online. So it's sort of like a Band-Aid to the larger problem, which is these sites should just not have you listed and not have the right info about you there. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, although I understand the drive to want to do it. It also it's kind of confusing and hard because these sites are pulling from public records. So they're pulling from places that have your information by a legal standard because you've submitted it for something. And so it's not easy to just give misinformation to the DMV. It's not easy to give this false information. And the slippery slope could result in you getting into a position where you are giving bad or fake info and put you in a legal concern way. So I would say I would personally avoid it for your own protection and safety as a result to these issues. But if you are sharing information online, there's sort of wrong info, like a bad email address that you can share that's pretty easy to tackle and feels pretty low bar and safe. There's other sort of information like a date and birth, like you would not change that on your driver's license. It's obviously has to be real there, but when you sign up for a site that requires you to put it in, do you have to put your real one? I don't always, so I don't think you have to there either. It's a tough question. I appreciate so many of you asking, as I can see, but it is a little bit of a one where we have to weigh our options. Oh, and I see people asking about ancestry sites and Facebook, and I just want to tell you that that would take way more time than we have to talk about. That there is a lot of things we can talk about security concerns as it relates to information that you share on other sites, because they are often sold and scraped for other reasons, which is how they monetize in a short nutshell. But that is way beyond our Finder sites today, and generally a lot of the same privacy practices are applicable there, but also you just want to remain safe when there as well. Okay, so we're coming up on our time. I am literally trying to pull myself out of these questions. There is so much to go on here, and I really appreciate all of you taking the time to ask them. I know so many of you have answered questions for each other in there, and there's a lot that we still need to figure out as a community and group, and that's okay. That just means we're trying to get at the right questions. That means we're picking at the stuff that matters to us, that is confusing online, and solving it together. And I just appreciate us all coming at this with sort of open and honesty on what we don't know, but what we think we can try to tackle and how we can move forward with better policies, which I think in the end is so necessary to the root of the problem, is regulation around these sort of sites and the ability to opt out at a place that puts us consumers having more control. So I'm going to wrap up a little bit here. As mentioned, we will be sending all of this to you. So don't fret if you were not able to follow everything, if you want to go through it. We are here to support you throughout all of this. I recommend searching yourself often so that you can practice healthy wellness as it relates to your digital privacy. I recommend discussing and bringing awareness to Finder sites so we can all move towards the action part together. When you're speaking to your leaders and elected officials, talk about how this is an issue and a concern for you. Only a certain amount of states have laws or have talked about this, and we need to get that conversation on the docket. And be aware for more details and more information that we're sending out. When we send out the follow-up email, it would include all the resources and links that we have added. We are always open to more topics that you want to see and hear from. So if there are things that are coming up for you as it relates to this or other sort of concerns, please do let us know. You can reach us at community@cr.consumer.org. And I do want to say thank you so much for joining us. As always, we learned so much from you all in this call about what you care about and the questions you have. And we put all of those learnings towards more action and mobilizing here at Consumer Reports. So thank you to Yao for being a wonderful co-host and an expert in this field, trying to tackle it head on. Thanks for Chet for joining us for the Q&A. And Kimberly for joining in the chat and the production and the polls. Appreciate you all, and we will see you next time. So thanks, everyone.